And most IT departments were very busy last March getting people online, and I think IT departments are going to be very busy cleaning up the mess that they had to make to get people online the way they did. So right. We're going to be busy people for some time.
Yes. Yeah. First you enable the technology, then you add governance around it.
Yep. Very true. The previous presentation, the portals are just so impressive. They look so clean. They look so well organized. And I'm not from I don't have a Dynamics background. And on terms of the Power Platform, I stick to Power Automate and Power BI. I've never done much in Power Apps, but I always find them very elegant. Looks so polished and professional, and it would you could stack that up beside any ERP package any day of the week, and it would still look good.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm happy to hear that comment because I come from the team which actually built the portal originally before Microsoft acquired it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I used to work for ADX Studio.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and Microsoft had acquired that as a product, and then it became CRM portal. So, yeah.
Looks all very impressive.
We for the entire event that we run, we use a Power Platform. So our website is Power Apps Portals. Our background is Dataverse. Our whole automation and scheduler is Power Automate.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's communication. So yeah.
It'd be nice to have a session on how the platform was put together for this.
Yes, we have been working, and oftentimes when you're actually organizing the event, it becomes like, okay, do we pick to get everybody opportunity to speak, or should I get into presenting at that point? So we are planning on doing that session, but it might not be as part of the bootcamp, but like a separate session kind of a thing, maybe in a call or so. Yeah. Okay, I think it's time. So Norm, welcome and thanks for offering to present and being here with us today. And all the best for the session. I'll let you do a quick introduction of yourself before we get into the topic. I'm pretty excited about the topic, though. Like anytime we are talking about multiple elements of the platform coming together, I find it really exciting.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me, and to all of the people that are attending today. I thank you very much. I'm sure it's been a very long day for you, taking in all of the awesome information that the other speakers have shared, and I hope today that I can show you some of the things that I like to focus on in the Microsoft 365 and Power Platform, and that is Microsoft Lists or SharePoint Lists and Power Automate, and show through a series of demos how you can extend the functionality that's delivered and not have to always revert to custom development, and look more towards extension and configuration. And this may not be a developer's platform. This is, in some content, may not be good for a normal business user, but those areas in between where business processes get left behind from enterprise applications or ERP implementations, these people's needs still need to be addressed. And using a tool set like this and guidance from professionals like ourselves, hopefully we can build something. So the title of the session is Build the Ultimate Issue Tracker Using Lists and Power Automate. And it's really a play on a number of blog posts that I've put together where I explore the issue tracker, which is something that's delivered out of Microsoft List, but it's more to showcase some of the functionality and what you can do with Power Automate. My name is Norman Young. I'm a Microsoft MVP in the Office Apps and Services space, which really whittles down to a SharePoint MVP. I'm coming to you from St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. I look behind me and I can see Frozen Lake, Ontario, and the beautiful skyline of Toronto. So I'm kind of close to where some of you might be. And again, thank you for taking time to attend one of the last sessions of the day and to spend some time with me. So as part of the Microsoft List rollout, we gained access to several ready-made templates, including the issue tracker. According to the Microsoft List Lookbook, the issue tracker template helps to track, manage, and bring issues to a close, making it easy to set priorities in the status column and send notifications to team members when issues arise. The new issue tracker template is a great choice for project, operational task management, and the out-of-the-box experience works well. But more value can be added through the addition of additional columns, views, column formatting, and most of all, automation. It's very straightforward to get started. As we're seeing on the screen, I've gone into lists, I click new, I chose one from the template, I'm giving it a name, color, more importantly, a location, and just like that, within moments really, the list is provisioned for me, and it had some of the column formatting and stuff built straight in. And so I was just highlighting the date reported column and the days old column. These are great columns, but you can see there's this calculated column, and it's always going to be saying days old is going to be the difference between the start date and the end date. And that doesn't always make sense for business processes when we're talking about something that has been completed. Why should we continue to track those days? So that's something that I want to address in this build. I also highlighted date reported. Well, that's great to know when something was reported, but I think we also need things like due dates. And there's not really much in this list that allows us to collaborate together to know where we are on those different issues. And so we'll look at addressing those issues and then getting into automation in the next slides. But as I'm going through, I'm going to be sharing blog posts that speak to each of these areas, and I'll be popping those into the chat, and I can make them available at the end of the presentation. If you feel like you want to ask questions, feel free to come off mute. I'm also watching the chat window on my other monitor, so I'm happy to answer questions in that form. And so it's great. I have this template, but it's empty. And so what I want to do is bring some existing data into an existing list. So to do that, I'm going to use Power Automate. And as we see, as I go through the build right now, I'm using a scheduled Power Automate flow. The reoccurrence doesn't matter in this case because I'm just doing a single import. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to make sure that my Excel spreadsheet has been properly formatted as a table, and I'm going to ensure that the columns line up that are in my list in a one-to-one relationship. And so I'm using the Excel list rows present in the table action. I'm pointing it to my site where the spreadsheet is stored. I put it to the name of the file and the table. Now I'm moving on to the next step, and I'm going to declare a variable. And this variable is going to store the date. Date storage in Excel is a little tricky, and we're going to have to convert it. And so at this point, we're going to create a loop container, apply to each. And we're going to take the output from the Excel spreadsheet, and now we're going to add another action. We're going to take the date that's in the Excel and put it into the variable that we just created. There we go. I'm assigning it to date reported, and now we'll get to the business of creating these new rows. Now, this is a one-time load that I'm doing so that we have some sample data throughout the rest of the demo. But I hope you can conceive of situations where you have an existing Microsoft list that has an ongoing need to import data, and it can be as easy as this. This is not hard to do, so long as your Excel spreadsheet is formatted correctly, and by correctly I mean has a table that Power Automate can interpret, and the columns line up, you'll have no problems doing reoccurring imports. So this might be valuable if you have legacy applications that are outputting files that you need to input or move to other areas. So it's a very simple way of doing an integration. And so now I'm getting into this crazy business of getting the Excel dates into a SharePoint list. And I have to do a very funky expression where I'm adding days to this date that is way back in time, 1899, December 30th. And then I'm going to put in the dynamic content of the variable for the date that we stored. I'm going to format the date lastly to be of a year-month format and a more friendly view of it. A couple more columns to assign, issue source, and finally who it was logged by. This one's important. So if you were specifying a user in your Excel spreadsheet that doesn't exist in your Azure Active Directory, it won't know how to resolve it. But in my case, I know it does. So I'm going to test. I pop back into the list to show that it was empty. And now we're running. And if we hop back over to our list, once the load is complete, we'll see that we've now got some test data that we can start to work with. It's a very simple pattern, and it can be used and extended out for other types of imports into lists. So let me pop in the blog post that talks about this in detail into the chat window for your reference. And let's move to the next slide. And so we talked about some of the shortcomings of the issue tracker at the beginning, and the out-of-the-box experience works well, but more value can be added by adding new columns, some column formatting, and most of all, some automation. So what I'm doing now is I've turned on versioning inside of the list, and we're going to create a comments column. And because we have versioning, we're going to be able to append each comment to the end of it. Otherwise, it would be an overwrite, so you wouldn't see the whole history or the lineage of it. So here we go. Append changes to text, and there it is. So instead of a single line of text on the screen, you'll see that view entries, and then you'll be able to click to expand it. And so now I'm going to add another date column, and this one's going to be very important to the rest of the work we're doing. It's called due date, and this is when the user or whoever the project is expecting the work to be complete. So I've created a due date column now, and this will be the anchor that we use for the rest of the Power Automate jobs that revolve around reminders and whatnot. But what I want to do is to bring in some of the awesome column formatting that comes with lists in SharePoint, and I'm going to format this column conditionally to say when it's after today's date, let's do something visually with it. It's not to make it pretty, it's to draw visual attention to the screen when something important like an event going past the due date has happened. And so I'm building up the logic, and it's very front end driven. I'm just clicking through and I'm saying if it's after today's date and the status is not equal to complete or by design or won't fix as some of the statuses that exist, then let's change how it looks. So in this case, I'm making it bold, I'm making it red, I'm going to put a border and an icon around it. So when my users come in, they can see, wow, incorrect values in detail report is something that I need to address. So I'm going to close that up, and now let's move on to the other pieces. I'm creating another column. And I want to replace the days old column, and you'll see in the existing column, it has all those numbers, 201, 213, and so on. Even though some of the tasks have already completed. So the second row says task being assigned went to wrong agent. It's continuing to calculate it even though it's completed, and it's 213. That's just, you know, a shortcoming of how that due date, or sorry, that days old was put together. It's just doing simple math. So can't do much to address that using the built-in calculated columns within Microsoft List. So I'm going to use Power Automate to create a daily batch routine, if you will, that will go calculate the days old only for those issues that matter. And so I've done a reoccurrence, it's daily. And now I'm going to initialize a variable, and I'm going to store the values from the date reported. This will be the start of that equation that we use to figure out how old the issue is. And so now I'm going to go out to SharePoint, and I'm going to pull everything from my list where certain conditions apply. And so you can see I'm setting it to my site, to my list, but I'm going to leverage the OData filter query to further refine the data that comes back. And so I'm going to look for items where the status is not complete, or the status is not by design, or the status is won't fix. And so that will only give me the records that I need from the SharePoint list. And so we're only taking what we need. Okay. And now we'll add another step. And I'm going to create another loop called apply to each. And I'm going to take the output from that retrieval of the SharePoint rows. And inside of there, we're going to do calculations and then update the table to show the new days old only where it makes sense to do so. Okay, so I've put in another action to set the variable. If the demo video is looking a little choppy on your end, I apologize for that. Looks like it's smoothing out now. If that continues, I will pause and start it back up again. And so what we're doing is, as you update SharePoint items, anything that is a required column, you'll have to put back in. Anything that is a choice column, you'll have to revalidate dynamically. And we're getting a little choppy, so if you don't mind, I'm just going to pause the video for 1 second. Give it a moment. And it skipped ahead. Sorry about that. Let me get us back up to where we were. I think we're up here a little bit more. Sorry about that, folks. I pre-record the demo, so I don't have anything technically go wrong, but for whatever reason, it's a bit glitchy on the playback, so I apologize for that. Right, so I'm going back, I'm setting there we go. I'm going to set the variable to the respective field. I'm going to set all of the columns I need to do in the update item. And like I said, anything that is a lookup column needs to be repopulated in any type of update statement inside of SharePoint. Otherwise, it will take the default entry if there's one set. All right, now I've plugged in this very ugly expression that will give me that calculation, and it was not legible in the video as I'm seeing it now. Hopefully it looked better on your end. And then I'm going to save and I'm going to test. And so what we're expecting to see is only the days old column will be populated in the rows that are still active. And so we should expect blank. So if an item was still in progress and this routine runs every day, then we will get those days old. Very good. let's skip over to the next one. So in this part of the demo, we're using Power Automate to create a folder inside of a SharePoint document library that can be used to store files associated with this particular issue. And yes, you can attach a file or a document to a SharePoint list item. But if you could imagine users and not wanting the friction of always having to go into the list item, pulling out the file, download, opening it, and stuff like that, it's not really a good way to collaborate. And so in this case, we will create a folder based on metadata in the column, and then we will create that folder in SharePoint. But more importantly, we'll have a user-friendly link as a column inside of the list. And at scale, this can be very helpful to the users out there. So to do this, I'm going to create a new column. It's going to be a hyperlink, and it's going to store the link to the folder location. So I call it folder location and click Save. It's empty. And so now I will go into Power Automate. We'll take a look at our flows. And this one is not going to be on a schedule like the previous two. This one is going to be based on a trigger where when someone creates a new SharePoint list item, this is going to execute. And so I'm giving it a name, issue tracker for new events, and I'm using the when an item is created SharePoint trigger, and I'll point it to my site. I'm renaming as I go because it can be very easy to confuse like named actions. If you have multiple SharePoint actions, for example, in a single flow, you need to map back to the right parameter. So giving it some type of name or a comment will make it less likely for you to make the mistakes that others have, where you're using metadata from one output versus the metadata from the output that you intended. And so the folder name is going to be a very simple expression where I'm going to concatenate a static piece of information. I'm going to say issue. You can use any naming convention, or you could use it and even use dynamic data. And then I'm going to use a piece of dynamic data. Now I'm going to use the unique ID that comes as part of every SharePoint list and library, and that's the ID column. It's not normally exposed, but it's easy enough to show, and it's, it comes sequentially, so it'll be 1, 2, 3, so on. Right. Next thing I'm going to do is another SharePoint action. I'm going to create the folder, and the folder is going to go into our target site, our target document library, and we'll use the variable that we did in the folder name to create the folder. All of this is very straightforward. It is, for the most part, we're just clicking, not too much in the way of expressions here outside of the folder name variable. The tricky part, now, will come when we try to take that URL to the folder we just created and get it back into our list. So to do that, we're going to have to use one of the more advanced SharePoint actions, and that is the send an HTTP request to SharePoint. And so what we're doing at this point is we're essentially executing Graph API commands. So I'm using my target site. I'm going to use a post method. I'm going to off the screen, and I'm pasting in text that I have. So this is here's the API path that I'm using. You can see the name of the list in the single quotes issue tracker. The item that we're going to go to is the ID dynamic column. The headers I pasted in, and I will share how to do that or where to get that information as soon as this piece of the demo is done. And here's the hard part. This is the body. This one's pretty complicated. Basically comes out and it's get the name of the internal list name, the field name, which is folder location, as you can see on the screen. And then because it's a hyperlink column, we have to put in two pieces of metadata. One is a description. So think of the friendly name that we see, and then the actual link out to it. So just to zoom in to give you an idea of what it looks like. So this internal name, pretty complicated to find because Sometimes it's not obvious what SharePoint thinks it is. I know in my friends who are in the Power App space, so what I'm showing here is that there is an API that you can call, that you can put in your browser that returns that name. If you're in the Power App space, and you do anything with a list, you're aware of how a space in a column name is converted to have that, underscore 0x200 or whatever it is. So now I'm back to my list. My automate job is ready to go, and I'm just doing a very simple test. I've created a new item. I'm going to jump back over into my flow to see how it's run. And we'll see that it's run. And then we'll hop over and we'll see that we have issue number 35. And I click into the SharePoint site, and here's my folder. It's a simple, creating a folder, it's simple. But what it does do, and I've seen this in the real world, is where users have people doing case information, where they have to have a named folder. The folder has metadata attributes in it that reflect parts of the business process that makes it readable for the administrators of that process to understand. And they need to store the documents in a certain way with a certain set of standards. They can't be locked down with too many IT controls, because there's always exceptions to these processes that they do, and it's heavily involved. So we look for opportunities to get rid of some of that friction for them. I don't want them to have to scroll through hundreds, thousands of folder names inside of a document library. It's easier for them to go back to that source list, use a filter or a search to find the case or the item that they're looking for, and then the link ensures that they're going over to the right location. I mean, how many John Smiths are there in the world, or other people with same names? Like, there's probably ways to uniquely identify someone, but that's not always the case, and that's not how always people work. So we've created a hard link, so there's no confusion around what they're doing and where they're going to get their information. So let me pop that link. If I'm not mistaken, I forgot the previous link. So there's another one. And I'm not doing this to advertise my blog. I'm doing this because I want you to see the other information about these commands in a way that's easier to consume on your own time and in your own way. And so the next demo that I want to show is how do you send email reminders from Microsoft Lists using Power Automate? And I guess part of it is the value of this. It just sounds so easy. Just send me an email. But those automated email reminders, they give users time and opportunity to intervene in business processes prior to expiration or before an end date. And in this example, we'll use our base Power Automate flow, and we'll look at the due date column. We'll send reminders 30 days in advance of that date, and that will give our users hopefully enough time to address an issue before it goes. So here we go. We're going back into Power Automate, and I'm going to go to my scheduled flow, and this is a daily. And I'm going to extend the work that we previously did. And I'm going to create a new variable. And this will be my reminder date. So this expression, I'll do add days, and I'll use UTC now for my SQL Server friends. That's a get date function. And I'm saying add 30 days and do a date format that is easy for users to understand. So that's good. And now I'm going to go retrieve my SharePoint list items where that date is the same as the variable due date or the reminder date. Very similar to what we did with the issue tracker days old step, only the expression, or sorry, the OData filter query will be significantly different. So here we are. We're going to say due date equal to 2 single quotes and then the var reminder date. It's hard to see those single quotes, but they're absolutely critical when doing OData filter queries. Next thing I'm going to do is send an email action. The moment that I put in the person column name, yes, the person column into that to field, it's going to put it in a loop container because it may have more than one row that it returned. And I'm going to give it a subject. And one of the nice things with using Power Automate and Microsoft Lists is you get metadata that you can use in your messages. So in this case, I'm statically saying reminder, and I'm dynamically saying the name of the issue and a simple text message saying it's due in 30 days. And then I can do something a little fancier using HTML on the message. And so this one will have a friendly link. And so as we were updating the list, one of the things that we did was to add versioning and also to add that comments column. So as people are collaborating, sometimes they don't know what their colleague has done or not done. So what we'll do is let the others in the team know by putting like a system generated message in the comments field that the reminder has gone out. And that's what we're doing here, is just adding to the comments area. And so if the business process runs awry, they have an understanding of what and what didn't happen. And so we're almost done populating those fields. We'll run a test and the user will get a message. And so while that piece of the demo is going, I'm going to pop the link into the chat, and this link again outlines how you can do it. And you know, it all got anchored on that due date column, and that's why it was so important to add, because it became the point where other things could be done. And okay, so our flow is run or saved, excuse me. Now I'm going to test it. It's going through. It did all those previous actions, doing the calculate of the days old. And now it's gone through and it's checked for any reminders. And so I've had to fudge a date in the list. And so now we can see here's a reminder, incorrect values. It's dynamic. I can click onto it and I go in, and then I can see that there's that system generated message. And that's how you do an email reminder in lists. Okay, in our final demo, excuse me, I'm going to show how to use a button flow. Excuse me. And what we're going to do is use that flow to move a list item from one list to another. So think of an archival process. So I've created a new list. I'm creating a new list right now, excuse me, and it's based on an existing list. So I'm using the issue tracker to create an issue tracker archive. The schema of the list will be identical. It only has a different name. Looks exactly the same. Go back into issue tracker, and I'm going to go back into Power Automate, and I'm going to create a new flow. But instead of being scheduled and instead of being automated, it's going to be instant. And my friends who use Power Apps, you know, this is the type of flow that they use to create a button and some type of response. For this particular thing, in the case of SharePoint, it's for a selected item. So you would have to highlight the item in the list, go up to the Power Automate menu and click it for it to do. So it will know what metadata it's pulling with to run. This is a very simple pattern, but I've seen it in the real world where they don't want the clutter in their list, but they're not going to commit to deleting it. But they do move it out to a graveyard, if you will. So what I've done is for the selected item, so visualize the user highlighting the item and then triggering the flow. The next step is to get all of the item metadata. So Power Automate knows what you highlighted, but it doesn't know what's in what you highlighted. So this is all we're doing here. And so I've I've named my site, my list. The ID is coming from the for selected item trigger. And now I'm going to create another SharePoint action, and I'm going to create the item in my destination list. So I'm pulling from the source, and then I'm going to move it over into the destination, or archive as we're calling it in this case. Okay, point it to the list. And again, this goes to the destination, so the archive, and I have to line up all of the column names from the metadata that I'm pulling from the get item from the source information. The tricky thing, it's not even that tricky, but the thing that you have to really pay attention to is if you have a choice column, it's always going to take the default value. You have to pull that source information and apply it over. And with SharePoint, you can get usually two versions of the same column. In this case of priority, it says priority value, but there's also a priority column. So there's the column and then there's the value. So you always have to get the value in that case. Similar to any person column, you could get all the metadata that you get from Azure Active Directory about a user, display name, email, claims information, and so on. In this case, we need the claims information. That is the unique identifier in Azure Active Directory and in Microsoft 365 that identifies you and I. So we have all of that mapped out, and it's a one-for-one. There's no looping, there's no getting multiple items. And so now, when this runs, it's going to get the information, copy the information over to the new list, but my users want it removed from the source list, and so I'm going to delete the item. So very similar to what we've seen before. Every SharePoint action, you have to tell it what site, what list or library, and an ID that uniquely identifies it. And so here's a great, if I can pause this for a sec. No, I missed it. What I wanted to show was, sorry about the video quality, but create item issue tracker destination. You know, it's like if I didn't put destination source, it would have been very easy to confuse those things. And I do promise you that these videos were made with 1080p HD high quality, so it's something I'll have to take away and try and improve next time out. I'm not sure why it looks as grainy as it does, but please accept my apologies for that. So in this case, we're going to execute. I've highlighted a list item. I'm going to go up to Power Automate, and you'll notice that my flow is listed by default. I didn't add it there. It just shows up manually because it knows it's associated. It's asking me for permissions and so on. You click Run the Flow, and if we watch, we'll see that that row will disappear after the flow is complete. And if we go into the archive list, so it's just disappeared. Let's hop over to the archive list. And there's the row. I do like this pattern. I've used it numerous times in the real world. It's been great for deferring items for later use, where maybe a business process transitions from one state to another, like short-term versus long-term, or something like that, or where there's different business rules that might apply. So interesting what you can do with that one. And again, the title of the let me put that blog post in. The title of my session was to build the ultimate issue tracker, and I really don't know if this was the ultimate issue tracker, but what I do know is that I took something that came delivered, and I extended its functionality to use and to meet various types of use cases or meet potential needs with Power Automate. And so, whether it was adding additional columns or using column formatting to visually highlight those issues that need attention, or even using Power Automate to import the starter data or refreshing the data or continuing to do ongoing imports of that data is something that you can do with tools at your disposal, in the Microsoft 365 platform. We can use Power Automate to do simple or complicated calculations that SharePoint lists are not suited to. Reminders, such a powerful requirement and functionality for business users who have more on their plate of responsibilities than we sometimes recognize. And if we can do the manual work for them, like running calculations, we can do the things that allow them to work smarter, then we move them up that value chain and we get rid of friction in their working careers. And one of the final things that we did was moving a list to the other. Like, it doesn't sound complicated, but there are situations where those needs have to happen. And really, it wouldn't take this long for someone who knows what something like Microsoft List can do in terms of functionality, and maybe more importantly, would know what it can't do. It's not going to be a relational database or a Dataverse replacement. It is something for modest business needs and business processes, and to know how to use and advocate for Power Automate to do some of those more complex automations that users might not know to do, and that's what we bring to the fore in this example set of demos that we've done. And so I like to think that Microsoft List and Power Automate are simply better together. When there is no app for that, when there's nothing that can be brought to bear for users in their small, modest business processes that get left behind, a configuration solution like Lists, low-code development tool like Power Automate can fill the gap for them and really bring them up in through that digital modernization effort that others are doing. That's it. If you have any questions about Lists, Power Automate, I'm happy to try and answer them. If you have questions about the things that I did in this demo, I'm happy to talk about that as well. I recognize that it's been a very long day for a lot of you who have attended all of the sessions to date, and this is the last one. This is always the kicker to get through. I see it's 3:40, which means we do get some time back, so please, thank you for having me. Happy to answer any questions. Mary, you're speaking my language. Yeah, Mary, thank you very much for saying that. I hope those blog posts can be of benefit to you, and part of the reason why I put this this session together, all based on the issue tracker, which is not the most life-changing thing, is that I received and I continue to receive a lot of questions and comments about those posts around the issue tracker for email reminders, for doing things with SharePoint and Power Automate. So I thought it would be an idea to put them together into a single package. I doubt very much that anyone in the real world is going to bundle all this up into the issue tracker, but it does show how you can, like I said a couple times earlier, you can really extend what's there and out of the box. Ramesh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I really do, and I do apologize for the grainy video. I'm a bit disappointed that it didn't play as well as I thought it was going to do, because literally my PowerPoint is like 350 meg. Like it's big. They're not small video files. Rohit, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Thank you for sticking around. I know I've been there with these demos and these long days where you're just getting bombarded with information. So thank you. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it wasn't so bad. So thank you. Oh, what do we do? Questions? So I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to talk further, but I do want to say thank you again for attending. If you're so inclined, please connect with me. My homepage is normyoung.ca. You can find me at LinkedIn at norm-young and on Twitter at stormin_30. Again, thank you so much. I really hope everyone took something out of the session and hope that you're all doing well in this new COVID world that we're in. Thank you so much, everyone. Oh, I almost forgot. Please fill out the survey. There's the link, and thank you to our event sponsors, Microsoft, KPMG, Evolvus. Thank you. Your generosity is very much appreciated bringing these together. And that is the end of the show, my friends. So at this point, I'm going to shut down